And if you're staying in here, open to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6 is where we'll read in just a moment today as we begin a new series on simplicity. So we are at capacity, apparently, in the United States, according to one of the executives at the furniture company, IKEA. He says that we are reaching a point in the West that he calls peak stuff. Peak stuff. This has happened in the oil industry. We've reached peak oil and peak cars and the sugar industry and the beef industry. This has happened already, where demand for those things throughout the 20th century grew and grew and grew until at some point you reach a peak point where we've saturated the market with sugar and cars and all those things. And the executive at IKEA is now saying that we have done this with stuff, with furniture and home goods and stuff in our homes, with bookshelves and candle holders and lamps, so much stuff that at some point people just can't contain any more stuff. We've reached peak stuff. We're at capacity. In fact, by one estimate, if everyone decided to leave their homes, this is real, nobody stays in their house tonight, there are enough storage units in our country for everyone to sleep comfortably tonight. We are at capacity. But we're at capacity, I think, in more ways than one. We're also at capacity with our time, it seems. We don't have space in our garages, but we also don't have space in our schedules as much. And that leads to us being at capacity when it comes to our energy, too. The lack of space leads maybe to a lack of energy. But there's one area where I think our capacity is unlimited, and that is our capacity to desire. Our desire actually outstrips our capacity. We still desire stuff even though we have plenty of stuff. I can still desire stuff even though I know more stuff doesn't make my life more meaningful. And even though I know that sometimes more stuff even makes my life less enjoyable, I can still desire more stuff. It would seem that there is no limit to the amount of stuff that I can desire. At no point would I suddenly just acquire the right stuff and then say, that's it. I've got the right stuff. I'm done. I've got it just right. So now my desire is over with. No, it doesn't happen. So if our desire increases always just beyond our capacity, then acquiring more doesn't seem to be the answer. Now you might say, well, Collin, what about desiring less? Couldn't you simply desire less? But what if desiring less is not so simple? What if desire itself is not the problem, not the issue? Because we do have some true desires, not for stuff usually, but for deeper things like peace and joy and purpose, which are really desires for God. Augustine said that all our true desires are desires for God. And we should not desire those things less. There are some things in life that it's not bad to desire more, like joy and peace and purpose and acceptance. Those desires are there because we have a desire for God. Indeed, we need to find a way to sort through all of the desires to figure out in the mix of desires which ones are conflicting and which are the true and the deeper desires and which are the just passing and, other desires. If we are all a mixed array of conflicting desires, how do we sort through all of that? Well, we get some help from the old grizzled cowboy Curly in the movie City Slickers, a movie that I love, and I think I have referred to a time or two before. It's possible. And the cowboy Curly says that he's got the secret to life, and it's this. And then the bumbling, disoriented city slicker, played by Billy Crystal, says, "What, your finger?" No. He says, "One thing. Life is about one thing. That's the secret." And Billy Crystal said, "Well, what's the one thing?" And Curly says, "That's what you've got to figure out." There's some timeless wisdom there. One thing. What we need is simplicity, to find the one thing, to figure that out. And for the next 4 weeks or so, we will talk about the Christian discipline of simplicity and what that means. Or we might say the disciplines, plural, of simplicity, because there are several practices that we'll talk about over the next few weeks. And in conjunction with this series, we are also going to offer another round of covenant groups. Covenant groups are simply groups that meet for a few weeks to focus on a specific practice that goes along with the sermon series. And last year, the focus was fasting, so you get off easy this year. And this year, the practice that we've chosen is simplicity. And the focus is action. The focus is not Bible study. Bible studies are great. And the focus is not getting to know folks, although it's fine if that happens too. The point is to practice something together. So when the groups meet, you'll discuss the practice, talk about how to do the practice in this coming week, and then throughout the week you'll do it, and then you'll meet the next week and talk about how it went and how you were able to do the practice. And each week will go along with the sermons, and there's little slips of paper in the pews there that are for you to sign up for covenant groups. I'll have a little name, email. It's actually a very simple form. I wanted to make it more complex, but I was like, no, it should be simple. Thank you. So here's what St. Francis said. He said, you only know as much as you do. So the invitation is to practice simplicity together with us. And the time commitment is 3 Sunday afternoons. I think that's a bargain. You say, what is simplicity? Well, as one theologian said, it is better to practice it than to know how to define it. So at the end of this series, if you know how to define it, but you aren't practicing it, then what's the point? Nonetheless, the old cowboy from the movie has defined it for us. Simplicity is where we make our life about one thing instead of all the things or many things. Living life at capacity or beyond capacity is not conducive to walking with God and experiencing His joy and peace. You can't just try to squeeze the spiritual life into the nooks and crannies of a life that is already at capacity. We have to be willing to arrange our life to make space for the one thing that our hearts want most, abundant life lived with God. And Jesus' teaching on simplicity is radical. Jesus speaks and confronts us. I mean, Jesus speaks into the insanity of our compulsive consumer culture, into the craziness of a culture where our number one recreational activity is shopping. Jesus speaks into our culture of desire. Jesus speaks to us in Matthew chapter 6. And he says this in verse 19. He says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve 2 masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And then skipping down to verse 33. But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Seek first His kingdom. Here is true simplicity. Don't make your life about running after all the things that in the intervening verses, Jesus talks about all the things. What will you eat? What will you wear? What will you drink? All the things that he says that the pagans run after. That's not a derogatory term for Jesus. He's just talking about non-Jewish people run after these things. Don't make your life about running after all the things. You can't even truly serve 2 things. You can't. Simplicity is a singleness of mind and heart. Seek first his kingdom. It is an inward reality first, and the inward reality comes before any external practice. Some of you may hear simplicity and you think about external practices like cleaning out your closet, or you hear simplicity and you think about spending less or being frugal or moving into the wilderness away from the world. But let's just put those things aside for a moment and listen to what Jesus says about where your treasure is. Where your treasure is, there your heart is. You can simplify all the externals, but if your treasure is still stuff, you've missed the inward dynamic Jesus is pointing to. So this is not just about externals, because you can't serve two things. What you treasure will capture your heart, and the direction of your life will move toward that thing. Whether you treasure acceptance or significance or power or wealth or whatever it is, where your treasure is, there you will find your heart, always searching for more, usually. If wealth is your treasure, and obviously the illustration assumes that wealth is the thing that captures our hearts so easily, but if wealth is your treasure, then your life will be caught up in the pursuit of it and in the storing of it. Whether you have a lot of it or a little of it, whether you've got a house full or you've decluttered everything, doesn't seem to matter. It might still have your heart. And you can try to serve more than one thing, but what you treasure will always win. And your life will feel fragmented from serving so many masters. So that's why Jesus says what he says next, and perhaps what's even more profound. And maybe you focused on the don't store up for yourself treasures on earth before, and you've ignored the next verses that connect what he's saying about treasure to the not serving two masters thing. He says, right after, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. He says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your body will be full of light. Now, this is hard for us. It doesn't communicate in the same way that I think it communicated for Jesus' original audience. We don't speak the same language, so there's some barriers here. But literally, the word healthy means single. The old King James Version is going to help you today. If thine eye be single. If your vision is single, simple, not fractured and divided. When Jesus says the eye is the lamp of the body, he's saying that the eye is the gateway through which the world enters. The eye is the way we take in from the world. So this makes sense, your heart and mind will be filled with whatever your eye is fixed on. What your eyes are fixed on, that's what fills your thoughts, mind, heart, the inside of your body. That's why he's saying the eye is like the lamp. It takes in and then fills up or illuminates your inside, your mind, and your heart. Our eyes and the direction of our eyes can have an impact on what we desire and what we treasure. So you do, some research on such and such car or gadget, or you think about the thing that you're going to buy, and you look and look again at this table or this couch, or you look at the reviews for these shoes. I want these shoes. These are good shoes, and you read all the reviews for the shoes, and the more you look at them, the more you want them. And you got a tab saved on your internet browser, and you're looking at those shoes again. And it's like, well, that's you just want more of what you look at. The more we look, the more we value. Your eyes focus on what you value, and then in turn, that makes you value it more. But think about what happens when you've got your eye on these shoes and you're reading reviews about these, or it could be a car or, a phone or something like that. But then over here, you're like, oh, but what about these shoes? These have good reviews too. Or this car has good reviews, or whatever it is. And then I'm looking at both and I can't decide. And when your vision is divided, it confuses your heart. Now, the darkness that Jesus talks about is confusion. If your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. There will be no clarity. There will be confusion if your vision is divided. If you're trying to chase more than one thing, there's confusion. Let's say you value a good reputation. Let's make it, not about shopping. That's just a silly example, right? But let's say you value a good reputation. Let's say you value the praise of others. So you speak in a certain way to keep your reputation or the praise of others. But because you also desire maybe your own way, or you desire profit or something else, you act in a way that is inconsistent with your words. Why does that happen? Well, because your speech and your actions don't spring from the same source. They are divided to serve different purposes. Your words are over here serving the purpose of the public self, and then your actions over here are serving a different purpose, the purpose of an eye on your profits or something like that. Your eye is not single, so there's confusion, there's darkness, because your life is pulled in different directions. You're serving the purposes of some different selves, some different interests in you. Or it may not be that sort of division either. It may be that in our world, there's a great crowd of concerns and worthy causes that press into our lives and demand our attention. This happens too, because there's lots of different things. There's children in need, and there's world hunger on the rise. And then there are political issues that need solving, but there's also this epidemic of human trafficking. And then you have neighbors who are grieving a loss. And you cannot make your life about all the things. But there's all these voices clamoring and saying you should care about this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And what Jesus is doing is saying, if your eye is single, if you make your life about one thing, then your life will have greater clarity. It will be full of light, Jesus says. Light is where you can see clearly. The simplicity of vision will bring clarity. Your whole body will be full of light. A single purpose will govern and direct both your actions and your speech, and a single voice will guide you to invest your time and energy. Okay, look at what Jesus says next. It's interesting that Jesus he doesn't make the opposite of the single eye a multiple or divided eye. He actually says, if your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are evil, is the word. Your translation, literally, Jesus contrasts a single eye with an evil eye. And in your translation, it might say healthy eye and unhealthy eye. And that's not bad. The word single does have a connotation of whole. You know, the word single has this connotation of whole, and whole has a connotation of healthy, doesn't it? Wholeness. Your body is whole. It is healthy. So that's not a bad translation. But to translate the word evil with unhealthy is not as helpful, because the evil eye is almost always it's almost always connected with an eye that covets the things of others, that is desirous. The evil eye is almost always referred to as a desirous eye. You cast an evil eye over things, it means that it's not focused on one thing. It's the kind of thing where your eye wanders around and lands on any number of things you might desire or covet or want. And whenever you split the focus of the eye, you split the focus of the heart, and that won't work, because you can't serve two masters like Jesus says next. That's what he's getting at. You can't be divided and enter into the kind of life that Jesus intends for you to live. It just won't work. And Jesus is beckoning us toward a life that is centered on him and inviting us into simplicity, to make your whole life about one thing and seek first the kingdom of God. That won't happen just by decluttering. We see that now. Okay, this kind of simplicity, making my life all about one thing, seeking first the kingdom, that can't just be about simplifying my house or my closets. It's not about living in a tiny house. It's not about embracing minimalism or a design style that is clutter-free and monochromatic. I mean, that's fine. I like those things. But those are all external things. And they can be helpful if they make space for your life to be about one thing. But you can get rid of clutter in your closets and spend less and be frugal, but still not have approached what the Old Testament described as shalom, which means, it's translated usually peace, but it means wholeness of life. And what the saints down through the ages have called the unattached life, or the life lived from the divine center. Simplicity can't be just about simplifying. It's also not about being simplistic. You see that with Jesus? In fact, there is some complexity to the practice of simplicity, and that's fine, because the opposite of simplicity is not complexity. The opposite of simplicity is duplicity, trying to serve more than one master. Duplicity is where your heart and mind and desires are fragmented and split between two or more different things. But Jesus says, don't worry about what you need, money, clothes, food, all of those things. And we say, Jesus, how can we not worry about all the things? How can we not make our life about running after all these things that we need? Jesus, don't we need food? Don't we need clothes? Don't we need something to drink? And Jesus says, well, hold on. The life of faith I'm inviting you into is a life where your first concern is not about your needs. Don't worry about those things. Don't make them the chief concern and run after them like others do. And you say, Jesus, how can you tell us not to worry? Has anyone telling someone not to worry ever had the effect of them not worrying and help them worry less? Well, no. And Jesus says, no, you don't understand. I'm inviting you into something so radical and challenging and life-changing. In fact, it will make you seem totally out of step with the world which runs after all of these things. I'm asking you to center your life today, right now, around one single, all-encompassing desire for God and his kingdom, to seek one thing, to have your vision be single. Stop trying to serve two masters or chase after many things. Just seek my kingdom. And then all the other things, they will fall into place. And it's so clear from everything we know from the gospel writers and everything written in the New Testament that Jesus Christ walked on this earth in what can only be described as having this amazing simplicity of life. That he was centered in God the Father and held a single, simple, all-encompassing desire that ordered everything else in his life. Simplicity is to will one thing, to desire one thing, to seek one thing. And the one thing is nothing less than his kingdom first over my kingdom. His will first over my will. And the first thing is just complete obedience to everything that Jesus tells me to do. Imagine how simple your life would be if you just said, well, I only have to make one decision really, and that is to obey Jesus in all things. Well, that is simpler. Now, is it always easier? No, but it is simpler. To seek his kingdom over your own kingdom just means that we desire for his will to be done rather than our own. In other words, obedience. Simplicity goes like this, and I'm paraphrasing Richard Foster here. There are not many things to keep in mind, but only one: to be attentive to the voice of the true shepherd. There are not many decisions that we have to make. In fact, only one: to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. There are not many tasks that we have to do. In fact, only one: to obey him in all things. That is the inward reality of simplicity. The only thing we have to do is, at every moment, attend to his voice. And the alternative here is to keep trying to attend to all the other voices. And let's face it, you can't just follow your heart because your heart is divided. You can't just be yourself because yourself is 10 different selves. You have a business self and a parental self. You have a religious self and an energetic self and a tired self and a professional self and a spousal self. And the moment you begin to listen to oneself who says, let's spend a relaxed evening enjoying the sunset, the business self and the productive self rises up in protest at the loss of precious time. And then the energetic self can't believe that you're just sitting there doing nothing, and the religious self reminds you that we should be serving others somewhere. Whatever you decide to do, there's a voice from one of yourselves that will protest. You should be doing this. You just need to. You just need to. You just need to. No wonder we feel torn. We feel distracted. There are so many voices. And the choice that you have to make in your life is to decide how long you're going to listen to all the other voices telling you what you need to do. What we need is a self at the center. The only way is to make your life about hearing and obeying one voice instead of all the other voices. That is simplicity. When the only thing is to seek first his kingdom. This does not mean that everything is simplistic. We will still be sensitive to the tough, complex issues of life. We can be obedient without oversimplifying everything. It is totally possible to be cognizant of many issues while having only one issue at the center, and that is obedience to the voice of Jesus. It also doesn't mean that you cease your everyday normal activities and become a hermit somewhere who just listens to the voice of God all the time. No, think about it. When you fall in love and you commit to spending your life with someone in marriage, it's not as though loving that person will stop you from doing all the other activities. In fact, it's the opposite. You will then want to bring the other person into all of those activities. You will eat together and work as a team to do all the activities you once did alone. Living life with God at the center doesn't mean stopping all your other activities. It means bringing God into each activity, living a with God life. And you might say that you might see that this involves this kind of simplicity actually involves what Paul spoke of as continual prayer, or when he said set your mind on things above, a kind of continual fellowship with God. The kind that other people have called practicing the presence of God. And that's precisely what inner simplicity consists of, yes. It's not separate from other disciplines like prayer. It is in some way the practice of continual prayer. But there's a prior decision of life that says, what I'm running after, what I treasure is his kingdom, obedience to his voice. Whatever he says, I'll do. Not just because it's the simpler way, which, by the way, it is. And not just because it's the path to true life and joy, which, by the way, it is, but also because Jesus is leading us there. Jesus is with us in this. When you decide to obey him in all things, he can be your teacher. That's where he is. He's leading you into following him in all things. Jesus is with us in that. He gave us his Holy Spirit precisely for us to live with this kind of simplicity, with one voice directing us. Is it really possible to give our attention to God even while we tend to kids and cook food in the kitchen? Well, it's sometimes hard, but it's more possible than you might think. What I found this week is that while I'm already in the habit of doing other things and also simultaneously listening to all sorts of other voices all the time. You probably are too. Because you're already in the kitchen and you're listening to other voices of like, what do I need to do next? What do I need to tend to? Where do I need to be? What do I need to do now? Right? And you're always listening to some of those other voices. And attending to God's voice was actually a little bit of a relief this week to not have to listen to all the other voices. When I sat down to rest in the evening and my productive self said, there's more work to be done, you could make another phone call, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to listen to that voice. I'm going to see what God says about this. And God said, then there was evening, and then there was morning the next day. And that was God's way of saying to me that even he rested from work in the evening, in the days of creation. And I was like, okay, well, God, I can rest here. I can just be done for the evening. I don't have to listen to all the voices telling me I need to do something else. I love what Frank Laubach says about this after spending 2 months in effort of trying to concentrate upon God. He says, this concentration upon God is strenuous work, but everything else has ceased to be so. Everything else has ceased to be so. This is the direction simplicity leads us, not away from our daily activity, but in all of our activities towards the one thing of fellowship with and obedience to God. And then you watch what happens. As a result of that kind of simplicity, when you arrange your life around one thing in the center, you will begin to see the need to maybe subtract, to let go of, to stop running after some other things that don't fit with your deepest and truest desires, to follow Jesus' voice and live with him. The one yes decision will then lead to 1,000 other things already being decided. Seek first his kingdom and righteousness, and all these things will be added or sometimes subtracted. Again, it's like falling in love. Listen to this quote I found this week. Nothing is more practical than finding God, than falling in love in a quite absolute and final way. What you are in love with, what seizes your imagination will affect everything. It will decide what will get you out of bed in the morning and what you will do with your evening and how you will spend your weekends and what you read and whom you know and what breaks your heart and what amazes you with joy and gratitude. Fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything. And this is how inward simplicity of heart and mind begins to grow outward and affect your relationship to stuff and your time and spending and all of those things. The goal of simplicity, not to become more frugal, to have more free time or be more generous. The goal is to live life at the center with God. And as you grow in your love and attachment to God, and that one growing attachment will necessarily mean a growing unattachment to other things so that then you can say some no to some things on your schedule because you were just saying yes to please people, or you were just saying yes out of guilt because the voice of guilt was there. And now you can it's simpler to just say, well, no, because that's not where God has called me right now. God's not leading me into that. No. I don't have to say yes to all these other things. I could ask you to begin simplifying your schedule, free up some time, and live with more breathing room in your schedule, but how do you decide what to keep? You have to simplify around something. You've got to know what you value enough to say yes to. And it's the same thing with our stuff or our spending or everything else. You've got to know what you treasure first. Then you can simplify around the one thing. So over the next few weeks, as we dig into practicing simplicity in covenant groups and in these sermon series, what you'll begin to see is that seeking first his kingdom actually looks a little bit different for everyone. But the voice of the shepherd is the same all the way around. You don't need to know all the ins and outs of simplicity, and you don't need to know all the problems or pitfalls of it. All you need is a desire to know him and to walk with him and to obey however much of God you understand. It's not me who needs to teach you this week. Jesus is your teacher. You pay attention this week to whatever is crowding out his voice, and then make it your goal to return again and again to hearing and obeying him. Then come back next week and we'll practice making our lives about one thing.